Hi guys, so today I'm going to be reading the next part of Adolphus Tips by Michael Morpurgo, and it's quite exciting because I think we just have, I think this is the last episode, so I'm not too sure. It's one chance out of 3, let's say, but yeah, so I guess I should start reading. It's exciting. The previous episodes are in the description, so you can go and check them out. Monday, May 22nd, 1944. Barry's 11th birthday. Barry's mum had brought down his birthday cake. She'd saved up her ration coupons for weeks and weeks. I made it special, she said, and it was very special. Fruit cake with marzipan and royal icing, with his name written on it in blue piping. Barry blew out the candles and closed his eyes to make his wish. Ivy had tears in her eyes and was trying not to cry. I think they were both wishing for the same thing, for the impossible, for Barry's father to be coming home. I'll miss Ivy when she goes tomorrow. I think we all will. She makes us smile. She turns off Uncle George's crackling radio and we talk. She laughs, and a lot. She laughs a lot and never pretends. Like that, she means it. Everything she says. I like people who mean what they say. A bit like Barry, really. But I wish she wouldn't call me Ducky. Friday, May the 26th, 1944. Mum's not been all that at all well. She's been coughing a lot for days now. She's very pale. The doctor came yesterday and said she had to have a bed rest until she stops her coughing. Grandfather said that I could stay off school and look after her for a day or two and help around the house with the cooking and cleaning. Barry said he'd stay home to help too, but Grandfather wouldn't hear of it and sent him off to school. Barry's not very pleased. He shouldn't grumble though. He's had lots of days off school to help out on the farm, especially at that lambing time. Mum had a letter from Dad today, so that cheered her up. He said he's somewhere in the south of England, he can't say where, and thinks he'll be going on the invasion when it happens. Maybe he'll meet up with Addie, like what we hoped he would. She keeps all his letters by her bed all the time beside his photo. This afternoon I went for a walk on my own up to the top of the hill. The larks were flying so high I could only hear them, but I couldn't see them. I did see the buzzards, 2 of them, floating on the air over the trees, mewing. For a moment they sounded just like Tips, meowing. Then I looked out to sea and saw the ships in the bay, dozens and dozens of them. I've never seen so many, and it's the invasion. It must be. They're not gathered there for nothing, are they? There's one other thing I noticed today. While I was up there, it wasn't only the sounds of the countryside I could hear about me. There was always a dull droning. I couldn't think what it was at first. Then I knew. It was the rumble of engines. jeeps, lorries, tanks. It was the rumble of war. I stood on the top of the hill with the wind blowing in my face, smelling the sea, and all I could think of was Addy. I said a prayer out loud, then I shouted it in the wind. Please, God, let him come and see me before he goes to war. Please, God, please. Tuesday, June the 6th, 1944. We heard it on the radio. They've gone. The invasion began this morning. Addy's gone. Dad too, probably. D-Day, they're calling it. I don't know why. We all knew something was going on before we heard it on the radio. Before dawn, there was a distant thundering and roaring out at sea. Out of the window I could see flashes all along the horizon, and I knew then it was just another thunderstorm. There must have been thousands of guns firing at the same time, and when Barry and me ran up over the field after breakfast and looked out to sea, we saw all the ships had gone. So it was no surprise when on the radio this evening it said that we had landed all along the French coast, Americans, British, Canadians, French, all sorts. Uncle George said we'd show the Germans now. He and Mum drank too much cider together, and we danced a jig around the table, around the kitchen, to celebrate. And Uncle George's mad dog danced too, barking and his silly head off. To start with, Barry and me sat and watched them. Everyone was laughing. That's all them dancing around the kitchen with the dog there. There's Lily. Is her name? That's Harry, Lily's mum, and Lily's Uncle George. Mum still coughs when she laughs, but she's much better. But in the end we got up and danced with them. We did a conga round and round the table till we all got puffed out. Then Mum gave Barry and me 2 mint humbugs each and some lemonade to celebrate. Uncle George and Mum had a whiskey each, and we all clinked our glasses. To victory, Uncle George said. Grandfather came in from milking later, and Mum told him what we'd heard on the radio. Grandfather came in from milking later, and Mum told him what we heard on the radio. He said nothing, but went to wash his hands in the sink. Then all he said was, "Poor beggars, poor beggars." Mum said when she came up to bed a few minutes ago that today was the beginning of the end of the war, that Dad would be back soon, and then we could go back home to the farm and everything would be as it was before. But I don't think anything will be like it was before. Nothing stays the same, does it? Nothing is like it was, is it? All I can think about is, as I write, this is what Addy might be lying about. All I can think about as I write this is that Addy might be lying out there tonight on some French beach, dead or wounded, and I'll never know, because no one will ever tell me, because no one will ever know that we knew each other. I try closing my eyes and picturing him in my head. I try so hard to see him not dead and not wounded either. I try to see him alive and smiling at me. Whatever happens to him, wherever he is, that's how I'm going to remember him forever. I know I should be thinking of Dad too, and I am. I'm trying. I'm thinking of both now. I'm praying for them too. This is me writing now, Bowie. This is your grandma. I wrote lots more in my diary after this, but none of it was very interesting. And anyway, the mice got some of it years later when my diary books were stored in a box in the attic. Mice or squirrels, I can't be sure. There's the writing. I've finished reading it there. There are only 2 more entries I wanted to show you. But because they've finished the whole supremely amazing story insofar as insofar as my story finishes at all. And if you don't understand quite what I might mean by then you'll find out soon enough. But not only after the whole of the story has unfolded, curiouser and curiouser. I'm going to read that off again. There are only 2 more entries I wanted to show you because they finished the whole supremely amazing story, insofar as my story finishes at all. And if you don't understand quite what I mean by that, then you'll find out soon enough, but not until after the whole of the story has unfolded. Curious and curious, I guess. Thursday, October the 5th, 1944. My birthday, and we've moved back home. It should have been the best birthday present I ever had. I was longing for today. And now it's come, and I should be happy, but I'm not. This house isn't my home. It's an empty shell stacked with furniture, tea chests everywhere, and it's damp. When we arrived, the front door was hanging off its hinges, so anyone could have been in and out, and by the look of it, they have been too. It's a real mess. There's black mould on the ceiling, green in some places, and there are dead birds and leaves everywhere. The wallpaper's falling off above the chimney in the sitting room, and half a dozen of the windows are broken. The rain's come in and rotted the windowsill in my bedroom. The ceiling in grandfather's room has come down in one corner. There's a hole in the roof where the slates have been blasted away by some shell. The gutters are full of grass, and one drain pipe has fallen down into the garden and smashed the greenhouse. Not that you can call it a garden, not anymore. You can hardly see a flower. Grass has grown up everywhere. You can't even see where the flower beds and the vegetable garden were. The granary must have taken a direct hit from a shell, because there's nothing left of it but rubble. Barry and me went off on a walk around the farm. There's nettles and docks head high everywhere you look, but the worst of it is that it's all so quiet. Only grandfather seems truly happy to be home. Never you mind, grandfather said this evening, as we sat around the table in the kitchen in gloomy silence. Once we bring the animals back tomorrow, the place will come alive, you'll see. We'll soon put it all right, spick and span, in no time. A few hens about the place and they'll cackle loud enough to drive out any quiet. I hope he's right. At least I'm back in my own room, even if it doesn't feel like it yet. All I've got so far is my bed, my chair and my lamp. My room smells, the whole house smells. P.S. I can't believe this. I just finished writing my diary and was reached out to blow out the lamp when I noticed something writing on the wall by the window in pencil. This is what it says. January 10th, 1944. Harry and Addie were here looking for tips. Welcome home, Lily. That's so nice. That was January. Before Harry died. I just keep reading it over and over again. I can't stop crying, and I don't know whether it's because I'm happy or I'm sad. I'm both. I'm not going to tell anyone about this, not tonight. It was written to me, so tonight I'm going to keep it to myself. I'll tell the others in the morning. I have to look at it again and again to believe it is real. Friday, October the 6th, 1944. Supreme, supreme. I feel supreme all over because just about the best thing that could happen has happened, and it happened at breakfast time. I wondered where I was when I first woke up this morning. The window was in the wrong place. I was lying in bed trying to work it all out when I saw the writing on the wall. Then I remembered everything. I was home. I jumped out of bed and called everyone into my room and showed them the message Addie and Harry had left. Of course I told them as if I'd only just discovered it. Grandfather wasn't there. He'd already gone up to Uncle George's to milk the cows. All we talked about at breakfast was the writing on the wall. But we were in a hurry because Mum said we had to go up to Uncle George's as quick as we could. Lickety-split, she said, to help fetch home the cows after milking. Anyway, we were washing the dishes when the back door opened, all by itself it seemed, and in she came, meowing and purring, all at the same time, wandering under the table, in amongst the chair legs, tail quivering with pleasure. Tips, Tips, alive. Tips, back from the dead. We were all crying, Barry too, and he doesn't even like cats. I put down some milk for her and she lapped until she licked the bowl clean. She's a lot thinner than she was, and there's a scratch on her face, which wasn't there before, but she's definitely Tips, my Tips. Green eyes, white paws, and all her black patches in the right place. And she purrs the same too. Mum said I didn't have to go with them to fetch the animals home, that she and Grandfather and Barry could manage without me. So all I've done today is cuddle Tips. I've played with her, fed her and cuddled her again. I think I gave her 10 months worth of cuddles in one day. She's come home just like Addie said she would. There's the picture of her and Tips. So cute. I didn't miss any pictures. By the way, the writing on the wall looked like this. It's just a font that they used in the book, but you can see it. I looked back in my diary to be sure. These are exactly the words. She'll come home. Black cat's a real survivor. Sure as my name is Adolphus T. Madison. So I've decided that from now on she's always going to be called Adolphus Tips. I asked her first, of course, and she purred, so I know she's happy about it. Mind you, she's been purring non-stop ever since she came home. I think she's happy because she's got an important sounding name and she likes to feel important. I keep saying it to get myself used to it, getting her used to it. Adolphus tips, Adolphus tips. It makes me smile every time I say it out loud because it sounds so funny, and because every time I say it I think of Addy. Just now I touched the writing on the wall before I turned on the lamp. I'm going to do that every night to bring him luck over in France, and then I'm going to pray for him too. Then maybe he'll come back like Tips has, like Adolphus Tips has. This is now before this whole story. And now, Bowie, over 60 years later, here's the beginning of the end of the story. Addy didn't come back, but there has hardly been a day since I've thought about him, and Adolphus Tips too. She was already quite an old cat by the time we found one another again, and she aged quickly after the miraculous return. I think that her struggle for survival on her own must have taken a lot out of her, and giving birth to all those kittens too. She died peacefully 3 years later, and I burnt her and I buried her in the garden. Gradually the people moved back into the cottages and farms all around us. As you can imagine, there has been a lot of destruction. Hardly one single building had survived unscratched, and many were in ruins. The farms and farmyards were infested with weeds and rats, and there were rabbits everywhere. Thousands of them. We ate a lot of rabbit stew. For a while it was sad. It was a sad place to be, but bit by bit things improved. The houses were repaired and farms tidied up. The church had been hit too. One of the walls blown out, so we couldn't use it for a while. Remember the first time the bells rang again. It was to celebrate the end of the war in 1945. That was the year Dad came home, and the year the village school opened again, and it was the year we got out our generator too. Dad had worked a lot on generators in the army, so he installed it himself. We were one of the first houses in the village to have our own electricity. Dad was always very proud of that. Later on, generators became his business. He took over one of the barns as his workshop, and he supplied generators all over the country, all over the world. Mum and Grandfather and I went on running the farm together, and we were quite happy to be doing it. After the war was over, Barry went back home to London, back to his mother. He wrote to me for a while, but then we lost touch. One of us didn't reply, I don't remember which. He came back to see us, though, several years afterwards. He had his new wife with him and wanted her to meet us, and to show her the farm, I suppose. I remember I was even a little jealous. He still smiled the same, was still very sweet and kind. He told us over tea that his stay with us during the war had been the happiest time of his childhood. He's living out in Australia now, near a place called Armidale in New South Wales. He became a sheep farmer. After this time with us down on the farm, he never wanted to be anything other than a farmer. We exchanged photos of our grandchildren at Christmas. I hope to go and visit him one day, we'll see. As you know, Bowie, Mrs. Blumfeld never went back to Holland after the war, but stayed in our village as a school teacher. You came with me to see her once or twice, do you remember? She's in the graveyard now, not far from Grandfather and Uncle George and Mum and Dad too, and now your Grandpa as well. I keep all their graves tidy as I can, and I often put flowers there too. Snowdrop, primroses, bluebells, daffodils, whatever is in season, whatever I can find in the garden. Sometimes we've done it together, Booey, haven't we? Now, to the end of my story. It was about 3 years ago. You had just gone back home, I remember, after spending your holiday with your grandpa and me. I was going for my usual walk along the beach, past the place where the old hotel had once been, when I saw a couple of men standing at the water's edge looking out to sea. I remember thinking it was strange because they looked a little out of place, not dressed for the beach at all. As you know, you can hear someone coming on those pebbles from a long way away. They must have heard me because they turned round to look at me at the same time, both of them very tall, and both were black. One looked much older than the other. He had white hair, and one was carrying a bunch of flowers. Maybe this was something I'd always believed would happen, because I knew who it was the moment I set eyes on him. This is so emotional. It wasn't only my eyes that told me, it was my heart too, but he didn't recognise me. They turned away again as I watched, and as I watched, both of them began scattering the flowers into the sea, throwing them as far out as they could, which wasn't very far. As soon as they floated in again and the waves washed up on the beach, I knew the flowers were for Harry. I waited a while before I approached them, not wishing to disturb the moment. "Addie?" I said. He turned and looked at me. It was him. It really was him, Adolphus T. Madison. I went on, "That's T for Thomas, Private First Class US Army." Then he smiled. The smile I remembered. "Lily?" he said. And we each took one another's hand, unable to say another word. So Addie and his son. He's called Harry. He's called him Harry. Came back to the bungalow and had tea with your grandpa and me. In between the scones and the macaroons. Addie and I told one another the stories of our lives. There was a fair bit to catch up on, as you can imagine. We had a wonderful time together that day. Your grandpa took Addie at once because Addie talked to him as if he wasn't in a wheelchair, as if he wasn't ill, and he always liked that, as you know. It was whilst we were talking that Harry told me that Addie had been waiting to make this trip all his life, to remember his old friend Harry, and to visit the farm again where Lily, the little girl with the cat, lived, and where they'd been made to feel so welcome. Oh, this is so emotional. Harry had grown up with the story all his life. Addie's wife had died 1 year or so before, and he didn't want to leave it any longer. So we decided we'd pack our bags and come right over, Addie said. "Say, do you remember the day we came visiting with the hot dogs?" We laughed out loud then, as we recalled the great hot dog feast and Barry's face covered in ketchup from ear to ear. I told him that Tips had come back home in the end just like he said she would, and that I'd renamed her Adolphus Tips, and he said that it made him feel real proud to hear that. They drove away after tea was over and went to see the farm on their way back to London. I should have liked to have gone with them, of course, but your grandpa would have been upset. No kidding. If I'd left him alone again. So after my daily walk, I left him alone again so soon after my daily walk, but Addy and I wrote to one another after that often. He sent flowers for your grandpa's funeral and then wrote to me afterwards saying that if ever I'd like to visit them in Atlanta, I'd be more than welcome. So I went, Bowie, and that's where I am now, in Atlanta, in America. I don't think the two of us have stopped talking since the day I arrived. We have a lot of time to make up, and so when Addy asked me a week ago, now it seemed the most natural thing in the world to say yes. We got married last Tuesday. Oh, this is so emotional. Second time around, and I've married my childhood sweetheart. The church was full to bursting, and you never heard such wonderful singing in all your life. They sing with such joy over here, as if they really mean every word, every note. So I'm now Mrs. Madison, and as soon as the honeymoon's over, I'm bringing him home with me to live in Southampton. We'll be having our honeymoon in New York. Neither of us have ever been there, and then we'll be flying back to London next Saturday evening. We arrive at Heathrow Terminal 4 at 7:30. I'm longing for you to meet him, Bowie. You'll like him, I know you will. I hope everyone else does too. Be there if you can. I was there, of course. We all were, uncles and aunts, the whole family. Some of them were still upset by the surprise of it all, but everyone was curious the most of all. Me most of all. So we were all waiting for them at Heathrow, ready with confetti. That was my idea. As we came out of customs, she looked so small beside him. They were holding hands and smiling like two cats that had got the cream and were blissfully happy to be sharing it. And then I was shaking Addy's hand. Hi there, he said, beaming down at me from great height. I reckon you've got to be Bowie. Yep, you're just like someone I used to know a long, long time ago, except you're a boy, of course. And you ain't got no pigtails. After a while, Grandma led me away, her arm around my shoulder. What do you think, Bowie? She whispered. Supreme, I said, just supreme. This is just so romantic. There they are. Oh, it's so emotional. Hi there, welcome to the post office. How may I help you? You would like to deliver a parcel? Yes. Okay. So first of all, I just need to see how heavy this is, if you don't mind.